Welcome to the Employment Services Show podcast. I am your host, Rana Kodahi, and I would love to introduce you to my special guest, Souzan Asfour. Now, Souzan has over 15 years experience working in employment services across both Jobactive and Disability, holding a range of different positions from business development, marketing team leader, and project management. Now, Souzan is the head of the employee engagement at Wise Employment, and she's passionate about making a difference by providing outstanding customer service to both job seekers and employers, which has created employment opportunities for candidates and has also secured ongoing business relationships with some very loyal employers. So thank you so much for joining us, Souzan.
Thank you for having me, Rana.
Great. So I'm just going to get straight into the first question, and I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this industry, employment services.
So my background's retail. For 12 years, I was working with major retail stores. My passion was photography and videography, so I was selling cameras and videos, video cameras, and also created a media school where I actually taught people how to use their cameras. Had a second child and decided to get out of the retail industry because it was just really long hours. Wanted to do something different, wanted to do a Monday to Friday office job, but I wanted a job with purpose. I wanted a job with meaning. I've always loved helping people. I remember my mum saying that Souzan's got a heart bigger than this world, and if anyone needed any help or support, all they had to do was ask. So I researched, and my sister at the time was working for a company called Wise Employment. She was employed as an employment liaison officer. So I looked at Wise Employment and looked at their vision and mission statement, and it really sat well with my values and what I'd wanted to do in my life, which was help people. So I started as an employment liaison officer in the Pirani SA, which is the employment service area. At that time, my son was around 2 years of age, and I was going through a really difficult time bringing him up. He was quite difficult in the sense he was totally different to his brother. Didn't know what was wrong. So I was trying to manage him at the same time, learn an entire new industry, employment services, learning the compliance, the obligations, the different terminology. But I had a drive, and I had a drive to help people. So I settled into the job at Paran. And did quite well there. And then about a year later, moved across to Dandenong. At that time, my son was around 3.5 years of age, and he was diagnosed with autism, which was a big shock for me because I didn't even know what autism was then, going back, 12, 13 years ago. At that time, I was working in Jobactive and doing really well, was really motivated and excited, but the drive to understand what autism is and to assist my son, but also other people out there, I decided to shift programs and move into disability. So at the age of 5 or 6, my son was also diagnosed with an intellectual disability. So that was even a bigger drive for me to understand the disability sector and assist people who have a disability to work outside and contribute to society. So 15 years of working across both Jobactive and DES in the employment services, I've learned so much, but that's the reason why I got into employment services.
Wow, Souzan, that is such a profound story and such a profound journey that you're sharing with us. And there's a few similarities. Like, for example, my sister was a photographer and I worked in employment services. I helped her get a job in employment services as well. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, so she worked in retail at a place called Starshot. So she was a little bit kind of sick of retail as well. But the point about how you was already working in employment services in Job Active when you found out that your son had autism, and you didn't know what autism was, and that kind of drove you to work in disability employment as well.
Yeah, I think Job Active back then was awesome. Like, I loved meeting clients and I loved helping people who really deserved an opportunity. Both programs are equally rewarding, but I think disability is more so, is because the disability people really want to be given an opportunity. I just think they deserve it.
Yeah, 100%. And also with the intellectual disability, my sister has an intellectual disability. So I think that's what drove my sister and I to work in this industry as well. So, yeah, so there's a lot of parallels.
Oh, wow.
Between,
well, between you and I, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So, Souzan, my next question is, you've been in employment services for quite a while, 15 plus years. And I just want to know, how has it changed and evolved over the years?
So when I started working in Jobactive in Paran, it was a massive learning curve for me. Like I said, I've come from a retail background, so I had to learn an entire new industry and an entire new program. So 15 years ago, Jobactive was massive then. Disability was in the background, but not as prominent as Jobactive. So when I first started working, it was, and I don't want to say it that it's not easy, but for me it was easy in the sense that I used the same philosophies I used to use when I was on the retail floor, selling a product to a customer. Very similar. I developed that and kept it simple when I was in Jobactive, that my product, which was, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the candidates, but I saw them as my product to market out to employers. So it was challenging because of the majority of the candidates back then, their biggest barrier was long-term unemployment. And I remember meeting a job seeker that I was looking after in Paran that hadn't worked for 23 years. And back then, the clients the candidates were neglected, in the sense that it was just basically not, that the hard ones were left to the side, and the easier ones that had the skills and abilities were easy to place. So back then it was concentrating on building their skills base and giving them the opportunity to find employment. But the biggest barrier back then for clients was maybe long-term unemployed and English as a second language. As we moved on in the years, as I said, Jobactive was massive, disability was in the background. But as I got more involved in disability, realised that the two programs slowly were interconnecting. So there are a lot of clients, I call clients, they're our candidates. So if I use the terminology clients, it means candidates as well. I saw the two programs slowly merging together. So a lot of the Jobactive clients that I was dealing with also had a minor disability in the form of mental illness. So if we go back 7 or 8 years ago, there was anxiety and depression and all the mental illness, but it wasn't as focused on back then as it is now. So as the years go by in working employment services, I found disability growing massively, and in the sense of mental illness, such as anxiety and depression, is becoming more and more and more a focus in our area. Jobactive is still very big, but not as, I believe, not as big as disability. The changes in the programs, the changes in the contracts, the government tailored the contracts to customer choice. So as the years went on, the job seekers had a choice to register with whatever company or whatever job service provider that they felt suited their needs. So now I think this is my 5th contract, and this is one that is totally different to all the other contracts that we've had in employment services. The focus now on employment service is more tailored support and tailored service to our clients. So it's basically changed in the sense that it's the candidates are our focus, and when they register with an employment service provider, it's their choice to register with that job service provider. It's not an obligation, or you're not forced to by Centrelink, which is when I first started in employment service. So employment service has changed completely over the years that I've been working, and I like this contract. I really do, because I think if the customer, who is the job seeker, comes and registers with us, it's by choice. So Wise is doing a lot of good things for our clients. They're upskilling, they're providing training, they're listening to the client's needs, and that's proven in the amount of referrals that we're having come to Wise.
So you've raised some very interesting points, and I've been in employment services since 2006, and there is a lot of things I learned just from what you're saying, specifically about how the biggest, and it just made me realize, yes, the biggest barrier in the job active was the long-term unemployed, because many employers are usually like, well, what's wrong with them? How come they have such a huge gap? And they kind of discredit them. And yes, and definitely the choice and control, I from what I've seen, is probably one of the best programs, because everybody wants autonomy and everybody wants choice and control as well.
And I think in today's service, when I first started in employment services, I was more educating employers on our services, our free service that we could provide. So I saw myself like a labour hire company, but without the fees.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really free, was it, Rana? Because you've got that background in employment service. We did a lot of work with employers, and we did a lot of work with job seekers to get them a job. So as the years went on, it was more educating employers about giving somebody who's disadvantaged or possibly might not tick all the boxes on their inherent requirements of the role an opportunity. So I started going away from saying that we're like a labour hire but without the fees, and I started more focusing on the person in front of me, like the candidates and their abilities and skills to be able to do the role.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you're so right. There is a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, from pre-employment to post-employment as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, Souzan, and I'm going to ask you to tell me about, I'm going to say job seeker, which is, we're talking about candidate or client, just to keep, to make it non-confusing for everybody, because sometimes we call employers clients. So
yeah, we do.
If you can just tell me about a job seeker that has touched your heart.
Okay. 15 years, Runner. I think I can share probably 100 stories.
I can imagine. I have no doubt. I bet that was a hard question.
It was. But I wanted to speak about someone recently that I've just placed into a job. So for this story, I'm going to change the job seeker's name and call him John. When I first met John, high autistic and social anxiety as well. He was an 8-hour benchmark, so we only needed to get him 8 hours of work. And when I started talking to John, his conversation, he was quite loud, and some people might perceive him as quite rude, the way he would talk to me. But I understood that was a part of who made him. Like that was part of John's personality and dynamics and who he was. As we started talking, he had a passion to work in manufacturing, but being an 8-hour benchmark, it was really difficult for me to find John a job that was just 8 hours. So talking to him and understanding what his abilities were, and trying to find something that without having heaps of people around him, just on his own, because I think he would struggle if I'd put him in a position where there was a lot of people. So as we started talking, he said to me, all I want to do is feel like I have a purpose, feel like I can contribute. And that just broke me, because all I could think about was my son. When he turns John's age, what am I going to find for him? So I went out and spoke to a door manufacturing company, and primarily they're one of my best employers, but they only employ full-time work. So as I was walking around the factory, I asked the supervisor, I said, who does the trimming for the doors? And he said, oh, we have able people doing that in their spare time. And I said, what about if I can get someone for you that all he needs is 8 hours a week? And it's a solo job. It's by himself, and all he'd be doing is cutting the trimmings. And he said I could consider it. So the next day I rang John and I said, John, would you like to come and have a look at this job? So anyway, I took John to this door manufacturing, showed him the job, but I pre-warned the employer, explained to him John's disability, and explained to him how he may come across difficult or quite aggressive in his communication, but he's actually quite placid. To cut a long story short, Rana, John started, and he's been there for 4 or 5 weeks, and every time I see him and when I go and visit this door manufacturing, he has the biggest smile on his face. And he never said thank you, which it doesn't matter, because when I see him working and the smile on his face is enough for me. And the supervisor came up to me and he said, thank you for getting John, Souzan. He's absolutely awesome. Fitted in with the other 2 members that are working in that same section, and they absolutely adore him, and he's making a contribution. That just put the biggest smile on my face, seeing John contributing and working in a job that he wanted and he dreamed of. So it was the biggest achievement for me, and that's just been recently. That's in the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Wow, Souzan, that I mean, I just got chills listening to this story, and it even reminded me of different customers, job seekers that I had that I even forgot about, and remembering them and that smile on their face. And I just love how, I mean, when he said, all I want to do is have a purpose.
Yeah.
And I think if it was anyone else dealing with John, or not anyone else, but most other consultants, maybe they wouldn't have been able to have that empathy or understand him on the level that you do, because you've got first level experience as well. And at the same time, I mean, yeah, you don't need a thank you, but to see that smile on his face, that just says it all.
Rana, I think people have to understand that I generally believe everyone wants to feel like they fit in, or want to feel like they're contributing in some way.
That's true.
And if we go back 10 or 15 years ago, if I met John, I'd be ratting my brains thinking, where am I going to find him a job? Like, who's going to employ him? And I would have all these assumptions in my head. But as you work in this industry, and 15 years down the track, you build your passion, of course, but you build your strength into wanting to find that opportunity and find that employer that will give him that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And something that did stand out to me from what you said is, I pre-warned the employer that he could come across as difficult. And I don't see that happening enough in employment services, whether it's Jobactive or disability employment, where they go in and they say, oh, this person's perfect, they're going to do this, that. And at the end of the day, they are not selling the right product or like person. And, you know, you've
No.
been honest. I think that's going to build so much more trust.
Well, I think I developed that skill really early in the piece when I started
Mm,
working in employment services runner. I realised that we're not dealing with perfect people, and they're not going to have all the inherent requirements of the role, and they're not going to be easy in the
yeah.
sense that they're just going to fit into the culture and team. And I realised if I'm ever going to have the respect of our customers, which is our job seekers and our
Yeah.
employers, I need to be honest and transparent from the first go. At the initial meeting, I share all warts and all with the employer. So what that means is that I share all the positive stuff and their abilities and their attitude in wanting to fit in, but I also share the other spectrum as well, which is the support needs for our clients, and I share what the job seeker might need in the
Mm,
workplace. So the employer has a full understanding, and we enter this business partnership with both eyes open.
yeah.
I learned that really early in the piece.
Absolutely. And it is a partnership, 100%. So my next question is, I'm going to ask you, what's the most important thing that you've learned throughout your career in this industry?
The most important thing I've learned is to keep it simple and listen. So what I mean by that, as the years went on and the change of contracts and the focus on employment services changed, Wise realised that there's two most important customers in this industry, which is our employers and our job seekers. So our entire focus for the last 2 years has been rotating around servicing those two important customers. So our philosophy here is customer centricity. And what I've learned and developed over the 15 years is that I came into an industry that was complex in my eyes. I mean, I was working in retail, so when I came into employment services, there was so much to learn. I remember picking up the contract and it was massive, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to learn all this? How am I going to relay all this to the employer and the job seeker? Then I brought it back down to basics and kept it simple, Rana, and that is the essence of our role is basically to understand our job seekers, have an understanding of what their skill sets are, what their passion, what they'd like to do, and then converse that with the employer, and finding an employer that is open to embracing diversity and open to accepting people for who they are, and marrying those two up. And I mentioned before that I'm quite honest and transparent in my communication, because we're dealing with people that are quite sensitive and then that have a very low self-esteem because they know they're already on the back foot when it comes to going out and finding a job. So when I talk to an employer, I keep it simple. I take all the jargon out of the employment service contract and I just basically speak in layman terms and be honest and transparent about the job seeker and what their skill sets are, and try and marry the right employer with the right job seeker. So simplicity is really important working in employment service. And the other important thing I've learned in this industry is when I first started, coming from a retail background, I used to talk a lot, and I didn't listen to what the job seeker was telling me, and I made a lot of mistakes. But I learned quickly that the job seeker knows their skills and abilities better than we ever will. They know their limitations and their aches and pains and what they can and cannot do. So biggest learning curve is to listen to the job seeker, listen to what they're saying, and have an understanding of what their passion is and what they'd like to do, and then go out and find an employer. And there are employers out there that will consider that job seeker for a job. So two important things: simplicity and listen. If you get that right, then it's sustainable employment for a long time. I remember just going to the plaza, Dandenong Plaza, and took my son there shopping, and I was waiting in line at McDonald's, and I turned around and I saw a job seeker that I'd placed 4 years ago working behind the counter. As soon as he saw me, he came up and I said to him, "You're still here?" And he said, "Thanks to you, Souzan." And that was 4 years ago, because I took the time to listen, and I took the time to find out what he really wanted. So that just the biggest smile on my face. And my son said to me, Mum, who's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's someone that I helped 4 years ago."
Wow. So once again, you've said some outstanding things that I just thought. So simplicity and listen, which I think you said were your biggest takeaways in the years. And going into when I saw the contract, anytime I saw the contract, I thought, how am I going to learn this? But then I always realized that if I know it too much, it's going to complicate things. So you're 100% right there. And when you saw that man and 4 years later you saw him and he said, "It's thanks to you." Yeah, I can imagine that feeling of feeling like a sense of, I don't know, is it achievement or...
Oh, it's overwhelming, Rana. Yeah, because I always get teary. I get quite emotional, only because it just makes me so happy to see someone thriving in a job that I've supported them with so many years ago. And when I think about when I first met this job seeker, how low self-esteem he wasn't confident. He basically said to me, "Souzan, look at me, who would employ me?" And that just tore my heart out. For anyone that's worked with me in job service, they understand that, and they also know me really well. If someone touches my heart, and is genuine and sincere and really wants to work, then I will move heaven and earth to find them an employer that will take them on.
Yeah, and that's important. I think if somebody has the right attitude, then it's not very difficult to find the right employer for them. And it all depends on that person at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, I want to know about, because I mean, you're a leader at the moment and you've been a leader for a while. What is your strategy when it comes to leading your team and driving performance?
I have a team of disability employment specialists that work with me. And one of the drivers I install in them is I strongly believe, Rana, that a resume doesn't sell our clients. A piece of paper doesn't sell our job seekers. I don't think it does them justice. So when I drive my team, I encourage them to get to know their job seekers and get to know them by listening. And over a period of time, build a rapport with the job seeker, that they understand what their skill sets are, what their physicalities are, what their emotions, what support they need in the job. So when they go out to reverse market or to meet an employer, I encourage them that their minimum intention of the first meeting with the employer is to ask them for a meet and greet session to meet the job seeker. It's not to go out and to give them a piece of paper, to give the employer a piece of paper and say, "Here you go, here is a job seeker that I think is worthy of you interviewing." It's not an interview. I don't call it an interview. I encourage my team to personalize and the session with the employer, and highly encourage for the employer to have a meet and greet session, because I strongly believe that the job seeker, they're the best marketing tool themselves. When you put a job seeker up in front of an employer, they can market themselves, their strengths and their abilities and their passion and why they really want a job better than we ever can. And if my team know the job seeker really well, then they should have the confidence to be able to encourage the employers for a meet and greet session. Encourage my staff to make sure that every decision they make is about having the job seeker and the employer at the forefront of every decision they make. Customer centricity has just speaks volumes in our industry. The focus on the two most important customers. So when I drive my team, I keep it simple and ask them to listen, but their focus is not to go out and just basically create interviews or appointments with employers based on a piece of paper. Their minimum intention is to put the job seeker in front of the employer and have a meet and greet session. I am focused, of course, on performance, but I focus more on the job seekers, because I strongly believe that if you focus on them, then you will outdo your performance.
I like how you said I focus more on the job seekers and not performance, because if you focus on them, you outdo your performance. There were a lot of things that you said. I could just put them as slogans, as quotes, like a lot of wisdom. So some things that stood out: a resume doesn't sell our clients. I fully agree, because I've seen some of the most shocking resumes go out and the person is a lot better in their communication and their presence than the resume. I like the meet and greet and personalizing it as well. So it's not an obligation meeting. It's more of a meet and greet. And I love what you said about the job. Well, I mean, yeah, the job seeker is the best marketing tool. And you also said that. So yeah, thank you. So what I'm gonna ask you, the last question is, I want to know, what are some of your top tips when it comes to job carving, or some other people may call it job creation, for someone with a disability? And can you please explain what job carving is for those that may not understand it?
Yeah, so my understanding or my explanation of job carving is basically creating a job when one did not exist. And it's basing the job carving on the job seeker skills and ability. And this is, you know, people say to me, "Oh, Souzan, you do this all the time. It's easy for you." But I remember when I first did my first job carving, it was with my very first two disability candidates that I placed into a company. And this is a company that I've been dealing with for a number of years. And again, it's a door manufacturing company. And I remember speaking to the owner of the door manufacturing, and they specifically said to me, this was about 6 years ago, "No, Souzan, we don't do part-time. We don't hire anyone part-time. All our jobs are full-time." So I sat there and I was marketing two females from our disability programs, and I'm thinking to myself, how can I encourage this employer to consider these two candidates, these two job seekers, to share one job? So I had a full understanding of the admin role that they required, but my job was to job carve, manipulate the admin job and carve two positions out of one to suit the ability and skills of the two females that I was marketing. I spoke very passionately about these two females because I knew them quite well. And after building a rapport and understanding their skill sets, I knew they would be absolutely perfect for this role, but I knew they weren't quite ready to work full time. So my job was to communicate to this employer, these two clients with a disability, their suitability to sharing this one position. I can happily say that the business owner agreed, and he agreed to do it for a short period of time, which was for 6 months, just to trial it. And these two female candidates did an outstanding job, and 6 years on, they're both now, because after the 6 months, they were both happy and content, and were physically capable of working full time, and they're both still there 6 years on, both working full time. So job carving or job creation could be easily done if you believe in the ability of the candidates, the job seekers that you are marketing. It's not asking the employer to do anything out of the norm other than to believe in these people or the job seekers that you're marketing that they are capable of doing the job, just to be a little bit flexible in the interim while they upskill or build up their confidence. So job carving comes from your belief or your confidence in the person that you're marketing and creating a position based on their skill sets and their capabilities.
So a lot of insights and gold nuggets that you shared with us. And I love how you said that you thought, how can I encourage the employer to consider two job seekers? So it's not about just pushing something onto somebody that doesn't need it. And also you did build rapport. You went into a low friction type of, okay, try it out for 6 months, see how it goes. And then at the end it was successful. And yeah, 100%, if you believe in the ability of your job seeker, then you can sell them into most positions that they're suitable for.
Agreed.
Okay, so thank you so much. So we've come to the end. I really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned so much from your wisdom and your experience. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, whether they are employers, employment consultants, or work in the industry, or just anyone outside that might consider working in this industry in the future, is going to get a lot out of this. So where can people find you, Souzan? Where can they go to find you if they want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, okay.
I also work nationally, so we have offices everywhere in Australia other than Western Australia. I work for Wise Employment. Our head office is in North Melbourne. Happy to talk, to converse with anyone that wants to reach out. If you want to send an email or give me a call, I've got my phone number on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, perfect. And I'll be putting all that information in the show notes anyway, so people can just click on it and access your LinkedIn profile and your website as well. So anyway, thank you so much. Have an amazing day, week, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Rana. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.